The crystal chandelier in the Metropolitan Grand Ballroom sparkled like stars, casting shimmering light onto the polished marble floor. The clink of champagne glasses mingled with polite laughter, creating a familiar symphony of San Francisco's elite. James Carter, 26, stood beside a pillar, adjusting his black tie for the third time that evening. He had attended many events like this charity galas, where people flaunted their wealth through designer gowns and tales of summer villas. But tonight, something felt different. James scanned the crowd, where business people discussed portfolios and pearl-clad ladies boasted about European vacations. He felt stifled, as if his tuxedo were constricting more than usual. As the heir to the Carter family, one of the city's oldest dynasties, James was expected to uphold the legacy run. His father's investment firm marry a suitable girl and produce Carter heirs. But he always wondered, was this life truly his own? Then he saw her standing beside an enormous vase of white roses in the corner of the room. Amara Johnson, 28, was unlike anyone else in the room. She wore a simple navy dress that hugged her figure elegantly, but without ostentation. Her natural curly hair was pinned up, revealing a slender neck. It wasn't her beauty that made James pause mid-conversation with a donor. There were more striking women in more expensive gowns here. Her eyes quickened his pulse, deep brown, intelligent, and full of emotion, as if she were observing the world with curiosity and compassion. Amara was speaking with an older man in a wheelchair, leaning down to hear his words. When he finished his story, she threw her head back and laughed, not the restrained titter of high society ladies, but a natural resonant laugh that cut through the orchestra's hum. James felt his chest tighten. She was the only one not acting in a room full of performances. "James, are you listening to me?" His mother, Evelyn. Carter's voice interrupted his thoughts. She stood beside him, wearing her signature pearl necklace and a look of disapproval. "I was talking about the Henderson girl. Her father owns a vineyard in Napa. She'd be perfect. I'm sure she's lovely," Mother James replied, his eyes still fixed on Amara. The older man had left, and now she stood alone holding a glass of orange juice, observing the crowd with a pensive air. "James Carter. Look at me." Evelyn gripped his arm, her tone stern. "You're 26. It's time to get serious. Someone like you needs a wife who understands our world and the Carter family's responsibilities." Responsibilities. James echoed, his voice weary. He'd heard this speech 100 times. As the eldest son, he was taught that love was a luxury, not meant for people like him. But as he looked at Amara, he wondered if anything could be worth more than the feeling growing inside him. "Excuse me, Mother. I need to speak with someone." Without waiting for Evelyn's protest, James wove through the crowd, moving between clusters of guests with the determination of a man who had just found his purpose. As he approached, he noticed Amara's dress wasn't designer likely off the rack, but she wore it confidently, making it more elegant than any gown in the room. "Hello," he said, standing beside her. "I don't think we've met. I'm James Carter." Amara turned her gaze, sweeping over him, as if assessing whether he was worth her time. He saw her skin glow, as if the sun kissed her. Her eyes weren't just intelligent, but carried a hint of weariness, as if she were accustomed to being judged before she spoke. "Amara Johnson," she replied, extending her hand. Her hand was soft but firm, unadorned by painted nails or expensive jewelry. "I know who you are, Mr. Carter. Your family's foundation funds the literacy program where I work." Her voice carried a faint southern lilt, gentle but resolute, as if she'd fought to earn her place in this room. James felt his heart beat harder. "Just James, please. What do you do at the program I teach adults to read and write?" Amara said without a trace of boastfulness. People who never had the chance to learn as kids or were failed by the system. "It's meaningful work." There was no pretense in her words. Amara's candor was fresh air in a room where people exaggerated their charitable roles. "That must be challenging work," James said. "And important." "It is," she replied, meeting his gaze directly, as if testing whether he genuinely cared or was making conversation. "Most people here prefer to write checks and feel good about themselves. Working directly with people who need help, it's far more complicated." James smiled, drawn to her directness. "How did you get started in this work?" Amara hesitated, a shadow of sorrow crossing her eyes. "My mother couldn't read," she said softly. She grew up in Oakland in the 60s, a tough time for black folks. She sang gospel in church, but couldn't read the lyrics. "I learned early how much not knowing how to read limits a person's world." James fell silent. He'd never considered it. The ability to read something he took for granted could be a gateway to freedom. "Your mother must be an extraordinary woman," he said. "She was everything to me," Amara replied, her voice warm. "She taught me that no matter how hard life gets, you can still find joy. She always said, 'Amara, sing like God's listening, and live like everyone deserves love.'" The orchestra struck a waltz, and couples moved to the dance floor. James saw his chance. "Would you dance with me, Amara?" She glanced around as if suddenly aware of her surroundings. "I'm not sure that's a good idea, James. I don't really belong in this crowd." "Good," James said, offering his hand. "I'm tired of this crowd anyway." Amara hesitated, but James's earnest gaze seemed to sway her. She placed her hand on his arm, and as they stepped onto the dance floor, James felt the world shrink to just the two of them. Amara moved lightly, following his lead, but with a grace all her own. Up close he caught her scent, soft like jasmine and warm sunlight. "You're a good dancer," Amara said, the corner of her mouth lifting. "I thought people like you just stood around talking about money." James laughed heartily. "I learned from my grandmother. She said a proper gentleman needs to know how to dance and listen." "Your grandmother was right," Amara replied, her eyes twinkling. They danced in silence for a moment, and James felt time slow. He watched her trying to memorize every detail, the curve of her cheek, the way her eyelashes caught the light. "Can I ask you something?" James said, as the music softened. "Why are you here tonight? You don't seem to enjoy these events." Amara gave a wistful smile. "I'm here because our program needs funding. I don't like wearing fancy dresses or pretending to fit in, but if it helps my students get a better shot, I'll do it." James nodded, feeling admiration. "I'm here out of duty. My family expects me to attend write checks and maintain appearances, but I'm glad I came. Otherwise, I wouldn't have met you." Amara studied him, her gaze searching. "You know, James, your world and mine are very different. Your family, your friends, they won't approve of this." "I don't care what they think," James said, his voice firm. "I only care about you." The music ended, but they lingered closer than necessary. James felt something shifting, not just within him, but in his entire universe. "Amara, I want to see you again. Will you have dinner with me tomorrow?" She looked at him, her eyes conflicted. "James, I'm not sure you understand what you're getting into." "Then let me find out," he replied. "Just one dinner, somewhere quiet where we can talk." After a moment's silence, Amara nodded. "All right, but it has to be somewhere I can wear jeans." James grinned. "I know the perfect place." As they exchanged numbers, James caught sight of his mother across the room, her face set like stone. He could guess what was coming: background checks, warnings, pressure to rethink. But he didn't care. For the first time, James Carter felt he was living for himself. As Amara left, she glanced back at him one last time, her eyes like a promise of something greater than either could imagine. James stood there, heart pounding, knowing this encounter wasn't a mere chance. It was fate. The next evening, James stood outside a small eatery, hands in his coat pockets, slightly nervous. Bella's wasn't his usual haunt. No extensive wine list or silk tablecloths, just rustic wooden tables and the mouth-watering aroma of sautéed garlic wafting from the kitchen. But he chose this place for Amara because she wanted somewhere real where she could wear jeans and be herself. Amara arrived on time, stepping off a yellow bus. She wore blue jeans, a simple white blouse, and a vibrant red scarf, accentuating her warm brown skin. Her curly hair hung loose, swaying gently in the breeze. James smiled, feeling his heart lighten. "You look beautiful," he said, holding the door open for her. "Thank you," Amara replied, her eyes sparkling, but still carrying a hint of caution. "This place looks cozy. You sure you don't feel out of place?" "Only when you're not here," James answered, guiding her to a table by the window. They ordered seafood pasta for Amara and mushroom pizza for James and began talking. Amara shared her work at the Bay Area Literacy Center, where she taught elderly or immigrant adults to read and write. "Yesterday, I had a student named Luis," she said, her eyes lighting up. "He's 42, from Guatemala, works as a dishwasher in a restaurant. He wanted to pass his U.S. citizenship test, but couldn't read the questions. After 3 months, he read the entire test booklet. When he held his first certificate, he cried. I nearly cried with him." James listened, captivated by her passion. "That work must change so many lives," he said. "How do you do it? I mean, it must be so hard." "Sometimes it is," Amara admitted, stirring her lemonade. "Many students carry pain, poverty, discrimination, or feeling like they're not good enough. But they change when they learn to read their kids' letters or fill out a job application. They stand taller and smile more. That's why I do this." James nodded, filled with admiration. He shared his dreams, breaking free from the Carter family's shadow and doing something meaningful. "My father wants me to take over his investment firm, but I don't want just to make money. I want to build something that helps people like you're doing." Amara tilted her head, studying him curiously. "What would you do if your family didn't hold you back?" James thought for a moment. "I'd invest in companies doing good like clean energy or education for underserved communities. I read about a project bringing solar power to slums in South Africa. If I could do that here in Oakland or Richmond, I thought it'd be a life worth living." Amara smiled, fully relaxing for the first time that evening. "You've got a big heart, James Carter. But you know your family won't like that idea, and they definitely won't like me." James reached across the table, taking her hand, feeling its softness and strength. "I don't care what they think. I want to be here with you." Dinner stretched into a stroll through North Beach's cobblestone streets. They paused at an ice cream shop, sharing a cup of mint chocolate chip and laughing like old friends. Amara spoke of her childhood in Oakland, growing up in a cramped apartment where her mother Esther sang gospel in church every Sunday. "My mother couldn't read, but she knew how to make people feel loved," Amara said, her voice softening. "She passed when I was 15, but I still hear her voice in my head singing Amazing Grace whenever I'm scared." James shared about his grandmother, the only Carter who understood him. "She always said money doesn't buy happiness, but my mother never believed that. She wants me to marry a girl from a wealthy family to preserve the legacy." Amara stopped walking, looking him in the eye. "James, I'm not that girl. I don't have money or lineage, and I'm black. Your world won't easily accept me. I don't need them to." James replied, his voice resolute. "I just need you." They stood under a street lamp, and James felt a connection more profound than anything he'd ever known. He touched her cheek, and Amara didn't pull away. In that moment, he knew he loved her, not a fleeting infatuation, but a love ready to face any challenge. In the weeks that followed, James and Amara became inseparable. They wandered through Golden Gate Park, lounging on the grass and sharing favorite books. Amara loved Toni Morrison, while James favored John Steinbeck. He visited her literacy center quietly, watching her teach a diverse group from a 70-year-old woman learning to read the Bible to a young man fresh out of prison aiming for his GED. Amara's patience and compassion made James feel small, yet ignited his desire to become his best self. One afternoon, Amara invited James to a gospel performance at her mother's old church in Oakland. The church was small with worn wooden pews, but the atmosphere pulsed with life. The choir sang, "Oh, Happy Day," and Amara held James's hand singing with a clear, soulful voice. James, accustomed to the solemn services at St. Matthew's, felt liberated. He looked at Amara, her curly hair swaying eyes closed in pure joy, and thought, "This is where I belong." But not everything was easy. Evelyn Carter realized her son's relationship was serious. One evening, she summoned James to the family's Pacific Heights mansion, where ancestral portraits lined the halls. "James, I don't want to hurt you," Evelyn began, her voice icy. "But that girl Amara doesn't belong in our world. She has nothing to offer but trouble. Do you think this society will accept a couple like that? Or that our family will let you destroy our legacy for a black girl from Oakland?" James clenched his fists, struggling to stay calm. "Mother, I love her. Amara makes me want to live for myself, not your expectations." Evelyn stood, her pearl necklace glinting in the light. "If you continue, I'll cut funding to the family's charitable foundation, including her literacy program. Do you want her to lose her job?" James looked at his mother, feeling an unbridgeable divide. "You can take the money, but can't take what I feel. I won't give up Amara." The next day, James recounted the conversation to Amara in a small cafe near the literacy center. She listened, her expression pensive. "James, aren't you scared? Your family could make our lives very hard." "I'm scared," James admitted, holding her hand. "But I'm more scared of losing you. I want to build a life with you, Amara. Not just dating. I want forever." Amara took a deep breath, her eyes wavering between hope and worry. "You know, my mother used to say, real love is like singing gospel. It has to come from the heart, no matter what's around you." "But James, you're giving up so much for me." "I'm not giving up." "James," said his voice steady, "I'm choosing what matters most." A week later, James knelt before Amara at sunset on Ocean Beach. He pulled out a simple silver ring from a woman who believed in love, not the dazzling diamond of the Carter family, but his grandmother's ring. "Amara Johnson," he said, his voice trembling, "you make me want to live authentically. I want to spend my life loving and learning from you. Will you marry me?" Amara looked at him, tears glistening on her cheeks. She thought of her mother, the gospel hymns echoing in church, and the students she'd helped. And she knew, despite the challenges ahead, her heart had chosen James. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll marry you." They embraced, the waves crashing against the shore like a blessing. But deep down, both knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The Carter family wouldn't relent, and their world would test this love in every way. But that night, under a starry sky, James and Amara felt they could overcome anything, as long as they had each other. The San Francisco sky on the morning of James and Amara's wedding was cloaked in gray clouds, as if foreshadowing the turmoil. St. Patrick's Church, with its Gothic arches and vibrant stained glass windows, stood imposingly on Mission Street, ready to witness an unforgettable event. James stood in the groom's room, adjusting his white tie, his heart a mix of anticipation and resolve. Since proposing to Amara on Ocean Beach, the past 6 months have been a battle. His family especially, his mother Evelyn Carter, had done everything to stop this wedding. Evelyn refused to accept Amara, not only because she wasn't from high society, but also because she was black. Tense family dinners, threatening calls to cut charitable funding, and venomous whispers among San Francisco's elite made wedding preparations grueling. The guest list shrank as longtime Carter family friends declined invitations, citing busy schedules. The church initially refused to book the date, only relenting after James made a substantial donation. But James remained unshaken. He loved Amara, and today she would become his wife. Amara stood in the bride's room before a mirror, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed her wedding dress. Inspired by traditional African-American attire, the ivory gown was crafted from handmade lace, reminiscent of the shawl her mother wore while singing gospel. No extravagant veil or meters-long train adorned it, but the dress hugged her figure, accentuating her natural beauty. Her best friend Sarah, a fellow Bay Area Literacy Center teacher, pinned white jasmine flowers into her curly hair. "You look like an angel," Sarah said, her eyes glistening. "Your mother would be so proud, Amara." Amara smiled, but her heart was heavy. She had no father to walk her down the aisle he'd passed when she was young, and her mother Esther had been gone for over a decade. She would walk alone, but knowing James waited at the altar gave her strength. Still, she couldn't shake her fear. The Carter family had made it clear they didn't want her. She dreaded something happening today to ruin this sacred moment. "What do you think they'll do?" Amara asked softly. "James's family, I mean." Sarah took her hand. "Whatever they try, you and James will get through it. Your love is stronger than all of them." The church doors opened, and the organ's notes signaled the ceremony's start. James stood at the altar, his heart pounding as he looked toward the entrance. The pews held guests, not as many as he'd once imagined, but those who truly supported them. Amara's friends from Oakland, James's colleagues from the investment firm, and a few distant relatives willing to stand by him. Father Malone, the priest, who'd known James since childhood, smiled reassuringly. But James couldn't miss his mother Evelyn in the front row, dressed in black, the color of mourning, not celebration. Then Amara appeared, and James's worries melted away. She entered head held high, her eyes locked on his. The lace gown shimmered under the stained glass light, and her smile lit up the church. Amara walked confidently and proudly without a father to escort her, as if the world couldn't stop her. Murmurs of admiration rose from the guests, and James felt his eyes well up. She was everything he'd ever dreamed of. When Amara reached the altar, she handed Sarah her bouquet of white roses and took James's hand. "You look stunning," he whispered. "You're not so bad yourself," she replied, her smile making him forget the world around them. Father Malone began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God to witness the sacred union of James Joseph Carter and Amara Marie Johnson in holy matrimony." The words flowed, creating a sacred space around James and Amara. They exchanged glances as if promising to face every challenge together. James thought of their journey from that gala evening through park strolls to the moment he knelt on the beach. He knew Amara had sacrificed much the safety of her familiar life to enter his world of prejudice, and he vowed to protect her. The ceremony proceeded smoothly until Father Malone reached the traditional final prompt. "If anyone present knows why these two should not be joined, speak now or forever hold your peace." Silence stretched, and James squeezed Amara's hand, hoping the moment would pass peacefully. But then, from the front row, high heels echoed on the stone floor. All eyes turned to Evelyn Carter. She stood, her face icy, her black dress a stark declaration. "I object," she said, her voice ringing like a bell. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. James felt his blood surge, but Amara stood firm, though her hand trembled in his. "Mother." "Sit down," James said through gritted teeth. Evelyn stepped into the aisle, each step deliberate, as if prolonging the humiliation. "I object," she repeated, "because this girl can bring nothing to my son. She's an opportunist from a place no one knows, with a past of no consequence. She could never bear heirs for the Carter family." Her words cut like knives through the air. Amara felt the breath sucked from her lungs. She'd heard such vitriol before, but to listen to it proclaimed publicly before God and everyone was a different kind of pain. She wanted to flee, but James's gaze anchored her. He released her hand, stepping toward his mother, his face flushed with fury. "How dare you say these things?" he said, his voice low, but powerful. "How dare you stand in this church and insult the woman I love? Amara isn't an opportunist. She's the strongest woman I've ever met. She teaches people to read and gives them chances you'd never understand. She's everything to me, and you. Evelyn have no right to judge her." Evelyn didn't flinch, her eyes glacial. "James, you're destroying 300 years of our family's legacy. She can't bear children. Her family has nothing to boast of. Do you think this society will accept someone like her?" Amara's blood boiled. She stepped forward, standing beside James, her voice calm but sharp. "Mrs. Carter, I may not have wealth or lineage, but I have self-respect. I love your son not for his money, but because he's a good man. And I'm not here to beg for your approval. I'm here to marry the man I love." A few guests clapped tentatively, but Evelyn only smirked. "You think you belong here?" "Enough," James shouted, his voice echoing through the church's vaulted ceiling. He turned to Amara, cradling her face, his eyes blazing. "Amara, I don't need their legacy. I don't need money or status. I need you. You are my family." He faced his mother again. "Mother, if you can't bless us, you're no longer my family. Leave now." Evelyn stood frozen, her face pale. She seemed poised to speak momentarily, but James's resolute gaze silenced her. She turned, walking out of the church, her heels clacking like hammer strikes, sealing the end of their bond. The church doors slammed shut behind her, and the room exhaled. Father Malone cleared his throat, restoring order. "Shall we continue?" James looked at Amara, seeing tears glistening on her cheeks and strength in her eyes. "Yes," she said firmly. "Let's continue." The ceremony concluded in sacred silence. When Father Malone pronounced them husband and wife, James kissed Amara, feeling her heart beat fiercely against his. Applause erupted louder now from their true friends and loved ones. As they walked out of the church, hand in hand, James knew they'd overcome their first trial. But he also knew this was beginning a long journey where they'd fight to protect their love. Amara glanced at her lace gown, thinking of her mother singing Amazing Grace through the hardest days. She squeezed James's hand, feeling she could face the world with him. Today, they'd declared war on prejudice, and they'd won. The small wooden cottage on Monterey's coastline, perched precariously on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, shimmering under moonlight. Waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, blending with the wind, whistling through towering pines, creating a soothing lullaby. James Carter and Amara Johnson, now husband and wife, entered the cottage with radiant smiles, hands tightly clasped, ready for their honeymoon, a sanctuary to briefly escape the storms of their wedding day. But even the ocean couldn't entirely conceal the troubles lurking nearby. James set their suitcases on the wooden floor, pulling Amara into his arms. "Welcome to paradise, Mrs. Carter," he said, kissing her forehead. Amara smiled, leaning into his chest, feeling his warmth against the cool sea air. She wore a beige sweater and jeans, her curly hair loose, still carrying a faint jasmine scent from her wedding bouquet. The cottage, with its stone fireplace and large windows, felt like a haven crafted just for them. Paradise. Amara echoed, gazing out the window at the silver-lit waves. I never thought I'd be in a place like this. When I was a kid, my mother said paradise was church when the choir sang Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. But this, it's pretty close. James laughed, leading her to the sofa by the fireplace. I want you to see the whole world, Amara, starting here. They sat sharing a bottle of local wine, talking about simple dreams, lazy mornings, walks along the coast, and a future free from prejudice. James spoke of his first investment project, a startup developing affordable solar panels for low-income neighborhoods in Richmond. If it works, it could change hundreds of families' lives, he said, his eyes alight. I want to do it for you, for how you believe in giving people chances. Amara smiled, but a flicker of worry crossed her heart. The wedding day still haunted her. Evelyn Carter's insults, insinuating she couldn't bear children, had struck her deepest fear. Her mother Esther had struggled to conceive Amara, and Evelyn's words made her question whether she could give James a family. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on James's warm gaze. You'll do it, she said. I believe in you. The first 3 days passed like a dream. They woke late, made love by open windows, sea breezes caressing their skin. They cooked simple meals in the small kitchen, toast with butter and local jam, and strolled the sandy beach hand in hand. One afternoon, Amara sang Amazing Grace as they sat on a large rock, her voice blending with the waves. James watched her, thinking he could listen to her sing forever. But on the 4th day, their paradise was invaded. Mrs. Wilson, the cottage manager, knocked on the door that morning, holding a thick, cream-colored envelope bearing the Carter family seal. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, she said hesitantly. This arrived marked urgent. James recognized his mother's handwriting, feeling his blood heat. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson, he said stiffly. As she left, he moved to toss the envelope in the trash, but Amara stopped him. Read it, she said, sitting on the sofa clutching a coffee mug. We can't pretend they don't exist. James sighed, tearing open the envelope. The letter was brief, but each word hit like a blow. Evelyn wrote that he was destroying the family, that Amara was a mistake, that will drag you down, and that his father Charles would forgive him if he reconsidered and left Amara. Attached was a threat to cut James from the inheritance, including the funding for Amara's literacy center. James slammed the letter on the table, his face flushed. They never stop, do they? I made it clear at the wedding. Amara stared at the letter, her heart heavy. She knew James had sacrificed much for her financial comfort, family ties, and his place in high society. But Evelyn's words about her ability to bear children echoed in her mind. James, she said softly, do you ever think I'm not worth all this sacrifice? James turned, grasping her shoulders. Amara, don't ever say that. You're everything to me. I don't need their money or their approval. I need you. She nodded, but the worry lingered. They tried to reclaim their joyful moments, but the atmosphere had shifted, as if the outside world had crept into their sanctuary. On the 6th day, another knock disrupted their breakfast. James opened the door to find Henry, his younger brother. At 24, Henry was the perfect Carter blonde, in an expensive suit with a smug smile. Hello, big brother, Henry said, stepping inside uninvited. This place, quaint, isn't it? What are you doing here? James asked, his voice tense. Amara emerged from the kitchen wearing a t-shirt and shorts, her curly hair tied high. She nodded at Henry, her tone neutral. Henry, this is unexpected. Henry glanced at her, his smile not reaching his eyes. Amara, you look relaxed. He sat in a chair uninvited, as if he owned the place. James, I'm here on behalf of the family. We need to talk. There's nothing to say, James replied, positioning himself between Henry and Amara. Mother said everything she wanted at the wedding. Henry sighed, his tone patronizing. James, you're acting like a child. Mother may have been emotional, but she only wants what's best for you. This marriage is a mistake. He glanced at Amara. Can't give you what our family needs. An heir, a proper future. Amara felt as if she'd been slapped. She stood frozen, gripping the chair. The words weren't new, but they still stung, especially targeting her greatest fear. James stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. Watch it, Henry. I'm just stating facts. Henry continued unfazed. She comes from a family with nothing. Her mother could barely have children. Do you think she can give you a child? Or are you fine letting the Carter legacy die? Get out. James said, his voice ice cold. James, listen. Get out. James roared, pointing to the door. Leave before I throw you out. Henry stood, adjusting his suit, a sneer on his face. You'll regret this, James. This world doesn't take kindly to choices like yours. He left, leaving a heavy silence. Amara sank onto the sofa, hands covering her face. James knelt before her, taking her hands. Amara, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve to hear that. But what if they're right? She whispered, her voice breaking. What if I can't give you a family? James, you're giving up everything for me. If I can't... Stop! James interrupted, lifting her chin. I didn't marry you for whether you can have children. I married you because you're Amara, who taught me to live and love. If we don't have kids, we'll still have each other. That's enough. Amara nodded, tears falling. But Henry's words had planted a seed of doubt. They held each other, trying to reclaim peace, but the honeymoon was no longer the same. On the final day, they packed in silence, preparing to return to San Francisco, a world full of challenges. As they locked the cottage door, James took Amara's hand, looking into her eyes. We'll build our own life, he said. No one can take that from us. Amara squeezed his hand, thinking of her mother singing gospel through tough times. Together, she replied. They left Monterey, carrying their love and new wounds, ready to face whatever lay ahead, as long as they held on to each other. 3 years after their wedding, James Carter and Amara Johnson had built a modest but meaningful life in a small Pacific Heights apartment. It wasn't the lavish mansion James could have inherited. Still, this apartment was home with bookshelves brimming with Toni Morrison and John Steinbeck novels, paintings Amara created on weekends, and a kitchen always fragrant with coffee. James had left the family firm and founded an ethical investment fund supporting projects like clean water systems in Oakland. Amara expanded the Bay Area Literacy Center, helping hundreds of adults break free from illiteracy's grip. They were happy, but the wounds from the Carter family lingered, especially Amara's private fear about not yet conceiving. One Tuesday morning in March, a courier knocked as Amara sliced bread for breakfast. He handed her a cream-colored envelope bearing the familiar Carter family seal. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was an invitation to a baby shower for Laura, Henry's wife, and James's sister-in-law. Laura was expecting her second child, joyful news Amara wanted to celebrate. But she sensed this event could be a trap. We don't have to go, James said immediately, setting down his coffee mug. He stood behind Amara, wrapping his arms around her. They've hurt you enough. Amara turned her gaze pensive. Laura's always been kind to me, James. She's the only one in your family who didn't turn away. And it's your niece or nephew. We should go for family. James studied her, seeing resolve in her deep brown eyes. Amara still believed in mending bridges, even with a family that didn't deserve it. "All right," he sighed. "But if anyone crosses a line, we're out." The shower was held at the Carter Mansion in Pacific Heights, where James grew up, but now it felt like a museum of his past. As their taxi stopped at the entrance, James's chest tightened. The gray stone house with its manicured gardens and wrought iron gates remained as imposing as ever, but it was no longer home. Amara squeezed his hand, wearing a simple green dress, her curly hair tied with a red ribbon. "It's beautiful," she said softly, eyeing the house, "but I like our apartment better." "Me too," James replied, kissing her hand. Stevens, the family's longtime butler, greeted them at the door. "Master James," he said, his eyes lighting up. "It's a pleasure to see you again. And Mrs. Carter?" He bowed to Amara. "An honor." "Thank you, Stevens." Amara smiled, feeling a rare sincerity in this house. They walked through the marble-floored hallway, lined with Carter's ancestor portraits, to the rear terrace, where the shower was held. The terrace was adorned with pink and pastel blue silk tables, laden with macarons and champagne. High society ladies in floral dresses chatted, their glasses glinting in the sunlight. Laura spotted them first. She approached her pregnancy prominent in a white silk dress, her face glowing. "James, Amara." "Thank you for coming," she said, hugging them both. With her blonde hair and warm smile, Laura was the only bright spot in the Carter family. "I've missed you both." "Congratulations, Laura," Amara said sincerely, handing her a gift wrapped in craft paper, a vintage copy of Goodnight Moon, and a wool blanket Amara had knitted. "I hope the baby loves it." Laura unwrapped it, her eyes sparkling. "This is perfect, Amara. You knitted this blanket. It's so special." James smiled, but he noticed prying glances from the guests, friends of his mother who had declined their wedding invitation. Then he saw Evelyn approaching in a pale blue dress, her pearl necklace gleaming, her face impassive. "James." She nodded. "Amara." "Mrs. Carter." Amara replied, her tone neutral. The air between them was taut as a bowstring. Evelyn offered no apology, saying, "For Laura's sake, we should behave civilly." The party proceeded with strained politeness. James chatted with distant relatives who seemed more curious than hostile. Amara found solace in talking to Laura's friends, young women intrigued by her work. "Teaching adults to read must be so rewarding," one said. Amara nodded, sharing about Rosa, a Mexican student who learned to read to help her grandson with homework. "Yesterday, Rosa brought me a letter her grandson wrote thanking me. That's the greatest reward." The crowd nodded, but Amara sensed their distance. She didn't belong here, and they knew it. The gift opening began with Laura seated in an armchair, surrounded by lavish presents, designer baby clothes, a carved wooden crib, and silver toys. Though heartfelt, James and Amara's gift looked humble amid the opulence. Laura thanked them warmly, but Amara caught smirks from some guests. Then Patricia, Evelyn's closest friend, approached holding a small wrapped package. "Amara." "I have something for you," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "For the parties you'll host." Amara hesitated, accepting the package. Inside was a white apron, not decorative, but the coarse utilitarian kind worn by maids. Snickers erupted from a few guests. Amara felt the blood drain from her face, her hands trembling as she held the apron. The implication was clear. She wasn't a guest, but a servant. Laura paled, standing. "Patricia, this is completely inappropriate." "Oh, I just thought it'd be useful." Patricia interrupted, her voice sugary but venomous. "Since she won't need maternity dresses, I chose something she could use." The words were a dagger. 3 years of marriage and 3 years of hoping for a child without success left Amara feeling exposed before the crowd. She wanted to vanish, but then she thought of Rosa, her mother, and those who taught her to stand tall despite everything. James stepped forward, taking the apron from Amara's hands. He locked eyes with Patricia, fury blazing. In a slow, deliberate motion, he tore the apron in half, the ripping fabric echoing in the silence. "You're wrong," he said, his voice clear. "My wife doesn't need this. She's not here to serve you or endure your cruelty. She's here because she has a heart you'll never understand." He tore the apron again, tossing the scraps at Patricia's feet. "Amara is my queen, and I won't let anyone make her feel less." He turned to Amara, taking her hand. "We're leaving." They walked through the silent crowd, past the portrait-lined halls to the door. Laura ran after them, eyes red. "Amara, James." "I'm so sorry. Patricia had no right." "It's not your fault," James said gently. "Take care of yourself and the baby." "Laura." In the taxi home, Amara leaned against James, silent. At their apartment, she sat on the sofa clutching a photo of Rosa taken when Rosa received her first literacy certificate. "Yesterday, Rosa thanked me," she said softly. "She said I gave her a chance to start over. But there with them, I felt like nothing." James knelt before her, taking her hands. "You're everything, Amara. You teach others to rise, and you taught me to love. They can't take that away." Amara nodded, tears falling. She thought of her mother singing, "This little light of mine through dark days." Together, she said, squeezing James's hand. They embraced, knowing the world would keep testing them. But with this love, they would fight and win. Amara Johnson woke with an unfamiliar sensation in the spring of their 4th year of marriage. A gentle nausea, like waves lapping at her stomach, made her sit up in bed, hand on her abdomen. She brushed it off as stress. The Bay Area Literacy Center was in a hectic phase, with grant applications piling up and a student facing a personal crisis. But when the nausea persisted into the 3rd day, coupled with a bone-deep fatigue, a tiny spark of hope flickered in her heart. Amara, who had tracked her cycles meticulously for 3 years, realized she was 3 days late. She stood before the bathroom mirror, staring into her deep brown eyes. "It can't be," she whispered, but her heart raced. 3 years of hope and monthly disappointments had taught her not to dream. Yet, that afternoon, while James was at his investment fund office, Amara bought a pregnancy test from a nearby pharmacy. She tucked it into her purse, as if carrying a precious secret. Amara followed the test instructions in the small bathroom of their Pacific Heights apartment, her hands trembling. The 2-minute wait felt like a lifetime. She paced, touching familiar objects: James's razor, her moisturizer, a photo of them from their Monterey honeymoon. When she checked the test, she nearly collapsed. 2 clear pink lines, unmistakable. Pregnant. Amara sat on the tub's edge, tears streaming. She clutched the test, feeling the world bloom. After years of hearing venomous words from the Carter family, that she couldn't bear children, that she wasn't worthy, she carried a miracle. Her and James's child. She imagined telling James, seeing his eyes light up, and the day they'd hear that tiny heartbeat. James came home that evening, weary from a meeting with investors for his Richmond solar project. He caught the scent of herbs from the kitchen, where Amara prepared his favorite pasta with homemade pesto. "Smells amazing," he said, kissing her neck as she stood by the stove. "Special occasion." Amara turned, her eyes sparkling. "Just wanted to make you happy," she replied. But James sensed something different. She glowed as if holding a monumental secret. "Amara, what are you hiding?" he asked, taking her hand. She led him to the sofa, sitting close, her hand on his chest, feeling his steady heartbeat. "James, she said softly. "How do you feel about being a father?" James blinked. Then his eyes widened as the meaning sank in. You're pregnant." His voice cracked a mix of shock and joy. Amara nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I took 3 tests, all positive." James let out a whoop that echoed through the apartment. He swept her into his arms, spinning her, laughing and crying. "A baby," he whispered, touching her still flat stomach. "Our baby." They spent the evening dreaming of the future names. Amara favored Esther, for a girl to honor her mother nursery colors, and how they'd tell their child about a love that overcame every barrier. "They said I couldn't," Amara said, her voice firm. "Evelyn, Henry, they were wrong, James." "They've always been wrong," James replied, kissing her forehead. "You're my miracle." They booked an appointment with Dr. Sarah Chen, Amara's close friend, the following week. Blood tests confirmed she was about 6 weeks pregnant, due in November. "Everything looks good," Dr. Chen said, smiling. "Hormones are strong and you're healthy. We'll do an ultrasound at week 8. Amara and James chose to keep the news secret until the first trimester ended, a prudent but challenging decision. Amara felt like she carried the world inside her, wanting to shout her joy, but she feared something might steal her happiness. Morning sickness became a comforting sign. Each dash to the bathroom made her smile through the discomfort, knowing her body was doing its job. At week 8, they visited Dr. Chen's clinic for their first ultrasound. James held Amara's hand as she lay on the exam table, eyes glued to the screen. "There it is," Dr. Chen said, pointing to a tiny flickering dot. "Heartbeat strong, 165 beats per minute. Perfect." James squeezed Amara's hand, his eyes brimming. They left with an ultrasound photo, a treasure. Amara kept it in her wallet, stealing glances during breaks at the center, joy radiating. She began talking to the baby, whispering, "Your dad will teach you to swim, and I'll read to you every night." But their joy didn't last. On a Thursday morning in week 14, Amara woke to blood on the sheets. Not much, but enough to stop her heart. She lay still, hoping it was a mirage. "James," she called, her voice trembling, shaking him awake. "Something's wrong." The drive to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of their lives. James drove, gripping Amara's hand, trying to stay calm. In the ER, Dr. Chen arrived, her face serious, but reassuring. "We'll check," she said, setting up the ultrasound. Amara stared at the screen, searching for the tiny heartbeat that had become her world's center. But there was nothing. "It's just a silent black void." "I'm so sorry," Dr. Chen said softly. "There's no heartbeat." The fetus stopped developing around week 10. "This is a miscarriage." Amara felt the world collapse. She clung to James's hand, unable to speak. He held her, his tears falling into her hair. "Why?" she whispered. "I still felt pregnant." "Sometimes the body doesn't realize," Dr. Chen explained gently. "Hormones stay high, so symptoms persist." They opted to let Amara's body miscarry naturally, hoping it would be less painful than surgery. But that night, the pain began, not just physical, but the agony of losing the child they'd loved. Amara lay in bed, James holding her, both weeping in silence. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I couldn't keep our baby." "It's not your fault," James said firmly. "It's never your fault." On the 3rd day, still steeped in grief, Evelyn Carter appeared at the hospital during a follow-up visit. James and Amara, exhausted and fragile, emerged from Dr. Chen's office to find her in the hallway, dressed in black, as if attending a funeral. "What are you doing here?" James asked, his voice taut. "I came to see how you're doing," Evelyn said, her tone cold. "I heard about your misfortune." "Misfortune?" Amara echoed, her voice shaking. We lost our child, Mrs. Carter. Evelyn met her gaze devoid of empathy. I'm sorry, Amara, but perhaps this is a sign. Not everyone is meant to be a mother. The words were a blade. Amara staggered, clutching James. He stepped forward, face flushed with rage. How dare you say that, he roared. How dare you come here while we're grieving to spew your venom? You're not my mother anymore. Get out and never show your face to us again. Evelyn stood frozen, offering no apology. She turned her heels, clicking on the hospital floor. Amara sank into a chair, tears falling silently. James held her, feeling helpless against her pain. Amara returned to the literacy center the next day, despite James's pleas to rest. She needed work to keep from drowning in grief. Marcus, a 22-year-old former inmate, arrived at class beaming. Miss Amara, I got my GED, he said, holding his certificate. I want to be a counselor for kids so they don't go down my path. Amara smiled, though her heart was shattered. I'm proud of you, Marcus. She hugged him. At that moment, she remembered her mother singing, His eye is on the sparrow through dark days. She knew she had to keep going for Marcus, James, and herself. James waited outside the center, eyes full of concern. You okay? He asked, taking her hand. Not yet, she replied, leaning into him. But I will be, because we have each other. They walked home under the sunset, carrying their pain and love, the force that would take them through the darkness. A year after the miscarriage tragedy, James Carter and Amara Johnson had learned to carry their pain as part of themselves, channeling it into a drive to live more meaningfully. Their Pacific Heights apartment remained warm now, marked by new additions. A bookshelf filled with adult education texts Amara used for work, and a corner of James's desk stacked with documents for his solar energy project for Oakland's low-income neighborhoods. They avoided places where they might encounter the Carter family, opting for small Mission District cafes or parks far from San Francisco's center. But on a Sunday morning in September, the past found them in the form of Charles Carter, James's father. Charles, a tall man with silver hair, stood at their apartment door, dressed in an expensive navy suit, holding an envelope. James opened the door, stunned. They hadn't spoken since the hospital confrontation when Evelyn, James's mother, insulted Amara after the miscarriage. Father James said, his voice tense. What are you doing here? I want to talk. Charles replied, his tone deep and authoritative. May I come in? James glanced at Amara, who stood in the kitchen with a coffee mug, wearing a teal robe. She nodded slightly, though her eyes were wary. James stepped aside, letting Charles enter. The small apartment felt cramped with his presence, a man who'd built the Carter financial empire from a modest inheritance. Charles sat on the sofa, surveying the space with an appraising look. This place. It's simple, he said. Amara stepped forward, standing beside James. Mr. Carter, she said, her tone neutral. Are you well? Charles nodded, his gaze sweeping over her. You look healthy, Amara. I've come with a proposal for both of you. James crossed his arms. We're not interested in anything the family wants. Hear me out. Charles interrupted, his voice carrying a negotiator's weight. He opened the envelope, pulling out a document. I've followed your work. Your investment fund, James, it's impressive. You have an eye for projects that are profitable and benefit the community. And your literacy program, Amara. It changes lives. I want to take it national. Amara blinked, caught off guard. James leaned forward. In exchange for what, Charles smiled like a man who knew he held the upper hand. It's simple. You both attended St. Matthew's Church with the family today. Reverend Morrison is preaching on family values, and your mother wants the whole family present. 3 hours in exchange for millions in funding for Amara's program. Amara's heart raced. With that funding, she could open new centers, train teachers, and help thousands of adults learn to read and write. But she knew the actual cost wasn't just 3 hours. And after church, she asked, her voice cautious. We talk, Charles replied, about being a family again. Amara would be welcomed, provided she understands her place. James let out a scornful laugh. Her place is as my wife-father, not a servant or a charity case. Charles raised a hand, signaling calm. Think carefully, James. This isn't about you. It's about the people you could help. After Charles left, James and Amara sat across from each other at the kitchen table, his document between them. It's a trap, James said firmly. They always want control. Maybe, Amara replied, gazing out the window. But think of the people we could help, James. Last week, an older woman at the center told me learning to read gave her freedom for the first time. With this money, we could do that for thousands. James looked at her, seeing the conflict in her eyes. Amara always believed in change, even when his family didn't deserve it. You want to go? He said, his voice softening. For those people. For them, Amara nodded. And maybe, for a small chance, your family might change. They arrived at St. Matthew's Church that morning, a gray stone edifice with a towering bell where James had been baptized and studied scripture. The Carter family sat in the front pew as they had for 3 generations. Evelyn wore a deep blue dress, her face rigid. Henry, James's brother, sat beside his wife Laura and their 2 young children, James Jr. and Catherine, his gaze cold. Charles nodded as James and Amara took their seats, but no one spoke. Amara wore a simple black dress, her curly hair tied high, clutching James's hand. She glanced around, recognizing faces from San Francisco's elite people who had smirked at her during Laura's baby shower. She thought of her mother's Oakland church, where the choir sang, "Oh, happy day," with pure joy, and wondered if this place could ever truly welcome her. Reverend Morrison, a tall man with white hair and a booming voice, stepped to the pulpit. Today, he began, we discussed the biblical foundation of family, the order God ordained for marriage and society. The sermon quickly became a veiled attack, cloaked in theology. Morrison spoke of wives who know their place, biblical submission, and marriages blessed with children. He paused, his eyes sweeping over the Carter pew. Some marriages, he said gravely, are blessed with children as a sign of God's approval. Others face barrenness, reflecting a spiritual lack. Amara felt as if she'd been slapped. She gripped James's hand tighter, sensing his body tense. Around them, she caught probing glances. Morrison continued, women are called to motherhood. Those who cannot fulfill this sacred duty must ask what sin obstructs God's blessing. James shot to his feet, startling the congregation. Sit down, Evelyn hissed, her voice sharp. No, James said, his voice clear. He stepped into the aisle, heading toward the pulpit. I have something to say. Reverend Morrison interjected, his tone surprised. Mr. Carter, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, James said, standing before the pulpit facing the church. Hundreds of faces stared, shocked, curious, or irritated. Reverend Morrison just preached on family values, blessings, and lack. I want to offer another perspective. Amara sat upright, her heart pounding, her eyes gleaming with pride and worry. James continued, his voice resonating. My wife Amara has taught over 300 adults to read. She helps them read the Bible, fill out job applications, and write letters to their children. She changes lives in ways most of you here never will. The Reverend says barrenness is a spiritual lack. I say God measures love differently than we do. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but James didn't stop. The Bible I studied speaks of loving your neighbor, caring for the vulnerable, and not judging. When did we decide lineage matters more than kindness? When did we turn faith into a weapon to hurt? Evelyn paled, but didn't dare interrupt. James turned to Reverend Morrison. Using this pulpit to attack my wife is wrong. Using God's word to justify cruelty is unacceptable. The Reverend tried to interject. Mr. Carter, this is God's house. It is. James, cut in his voice steadfast. God's house should be a refuge, not a battlefield. He turned, walking back to Amara, his eyes never leaving her. My wife taught me what love is. She's my light, and no one, not my family, not this church, can make me abandon her. He offered his hand to Amara. Let's go, love. Amara stood, taking his hand, her head high. They walked down the aisle past pews of stunned faces. At the church door, James turned one last time. My family wanted me here to remember my duty, he said, his voice ringing. I remember now. I must love and protect the woman who chose to share her life with me. They entered the September sunlight, leaving the church and the Carter family behind. Amara hugged James outside, her tears falling. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, she whispered. It's what you deserve, James replied, kissing her hair. And what they deserved to hear. Amara thought of her mother in the car heading home, singing "Oh Happy Day" in that Oakland church where love was the greatest strength. She squeezed James's hand, knowing they'd severed the final tie to his family. The road ahead would be challenging, but with this love, they could build a new world, theirs alone. After the confrontation at St. Matthew's Church, James Carter and Amara Johnson felt as though they'd emerged from a war, yet also liberated. They had severed the final tie with the Carter family and were determined to build their world. A month later, they sold their Pacific Heights apartment too close to James's old world and moved to a weathered Victorian house in the Mission District, where artists, activists, and Latino families blended in a vibrant community. Built in 1906, the house bore the marks of time, creaking wood floors and peeling walls, but it was theirs a fresh start. James and Amara spent weekends renovating, learning to sand floors, paint walls, and replace rusty pipes. One Saturday afternoon, they sat on the living room floor, covered in dust and white paint, laughing hysterically when they noticed James had accidentally painted Amara's hair. You look like a work of art, he said, pulling her into his arms. We're doing it, you know, Amara replied, resting her head on his shoulder. Building a place no one can take away. She wore an old t-shirt and jeans, her curly hair tied with a red ribbon, still carrying the faint jasmine scent of her shampoo. The house wasn't just a home, it became a community hub. Every Tuesday, the living room transformed into a literacy class, with Amara teaching and James assisting with basic math. Their work flourished too. James expanded his ethical investment fund, backing a startup that is developing an app that connects homeless individuals with shelters and jobs. Yesterday, the app helped 50 people find a place to stay, he told Amara one evening, his eyes alight. Not big money, but real change. Amara, now director of the Bay Area Literacy Center, opened a new branch in Richmond, serving immigrants and former inmates. Her proudest moment was with Diego, an 8-year-old boy who attended classes with his grandmother Rosa, one of her students. With big brown eyes and a shy smile, Diego loved books, but lived in hardship. A Mexican janitor, Rosa worked 3 shifts to support Diego after his parents were deported. Miss Amara, can I learn to read like Grandma, Diego asked one evening, clutching the little prince. You can do anything, Amara replied, sitting beside him. She guided him through each page, her voice as gentle as her mother's gospel hymns. Diego progressed quickly, but his story tugged at Amara's heart. Rosa grew weaker, and Diego often slept on a classroom chair, lacking a proper bed. One night, after driving Diego to Rosa's cramped apartment, James looked at Amara in the car. That boy needs more than a class, he said. He needs a family. Amara nodded, her eyes glistening. I've been thinking that too. But James, can we? After everything. They began exploring adoption, a challenging journey. Through it, they met Elena and Noah, siblings aged 10 and 12, living in an Oakland foster home. Elena, with long black hair and wary eyes, wrote diaries to cope with an abusive past. Noah, quiet but bright, drew pictures of imagined homes. They attended literacy classes, not to learn reading, but to find warmth, something missing from their lives. "These kids," Amara said one night, lying in bed as moonlight streamed through the window. "They're like us, James. They need someone to believe in them." They endured months of adoption processes, background checks, interviews, and probing questions about their marriage and past. One social worker was skeptical. "A wealthy couple like you, why adopt older children? To ease the guilt over privilege." But with a decade of community work, Amara and James proved their sincerity with their ethical investment reputation. More importantly, Diego, Elena, and Noah spoke for them. They keep their promises. Elena told the social worker, her 10-year-old voice resolute. "They said they'd help me learn, and they did. They don't abandon me." In their 8th year of marriage, Diego moved in first, initially, temporarily, while Rosa recovered from surgery. The 10-year-old arrived with an old backpack containing a few clothes and the little prince. Amara and James turned the living room into his bedroom with a small bed and a bookshelf full of stories. On his first night, Diego sat beside Amara asking, "Will you kick me out if I mess up?" Amara hugged him, tears falling silently. "Never, Diego. This is your home." She read The Little Prince to him, her voice soft, echoing her mother's gospel songs. 6 months later, Diego stayed permanently and was adopted at age 10. Elena and Noah followed in their 9th year after clearing legal hurdles. On adoption day, all 3 children wore new clothes. Diego chose a superhero t-shirt, Elena a blue dress, and Noah a white shirt. The judge, an older woman, smiled as she signed the papers. "I rarely see a family so meant for each other," she said. That evening at a celebration in their home, Diego hugged Amara and James. "I can't call you Mom and Dad yet," he said softly. "But I love you." "We have time," James replied, ruffling his hair. The Victorian house now brimmed with laughter and chaos. Diego's homework on the dining table, Elena's diary on the sofa, and Noah's drawings taped to the walls. Amara and James also began mentoring struggling couples and hosting talks at the center. One couple on the brink of divorce over financial stress approached them. "You've overcome family and loss," the husband said. "If you can do it, maybe we can too." Amara shared their story from the charity gala to the miscarriage with raw honesty. "Marriage isn't about avoiding storms," she said. "It's about learning to stand together in the rain." James watched Amara, thinking of her mother singing Amazing Grace through hardship. He held her hand, feeling the strength of their chosen family. The mission house wasn't just a home. It was proof that love could build from broken pieces, and family didn't need blood to be eternal. The Victorian house in the Mission District had become the heart of the chosen family built by James Carter and Amara Johnson. 11-year-old Diego's laughter echoed as he played chess with James in the kitchen. 13-year-old Elena sat on the sofa writing in her journal with a pensive gaze. 14-year-old Noah taped a new painting, a vibrant house bursting with color to the living room wall. 5 years after the confrontation at St. Matthew's Church, James and Amara had not only created a home, but also a pillar for their community, transforming personal pain into a mission to heal others. Amara, now executive director of the Bay Area Literacy Center, had opened 3 branches in San Francisco, Oakland, and Richmond, serving over 500 adults annually. Her proudest achievement was Rosa, a former janitor who opened a small bakery after learning to read and write. James had just funded an educational app providing free lessons to 200 children in underserved neighborhoods through his ethical investment fund. Their work wasn't just a career, it was how they mended wounds from the Carter family and the miscarriage tragedy. One October afternoon, as Amara reviewed grant applications, her phone rang an unfamiliar number but a familiar voice. "Amara, it's Laura James's sister-in-law," said her voice trembling. "Laura Carter. I need help. My marriage is falling apart." Amara sat down, heart racing. Laura Henry's wife was the only Carter who had treated her kindly. But they hadn't spoken since the baby shower 5 years ago when Amara was humiliated with the apron. "What's happening?" Amara asked. Laura hesitated, then sobbed. "Henry's cheating. Maybe for years. I've tried to hold the family together, but I don't know how. I remember how you and James overcame everything. I thought you could help." Amara looked out the window and saw Diego and Noah kick a soccer ball in the yard. She wanted to refuse. The Carters had caused too much pain. But Laura's desperate voice reminded her of her mother singing, "His eye is on the sparrow through dark days." "Have you talked to James?" Amara asked. "No," Laura replied. "I didn't dare. But I don't know who else to turn to." That evening, Amara told James as they washed dishes after dinner. Diego, Elena, and Noah were upstairs doing homework. James dried a plate, his face tense. "This could be a family ploy," he said. "They're good at manipulation." "Maybe," Amara replied, setting down a bowl. "But Laura's not like them. She needs us, James. And if we help, it's because we believe in healing, not for your family." James nodded, taking her hand. "All right. But we do it our way. No contact with Mother or Henry." They met Laura the following week at a small Castro cafe far from Carter territory. Laura, 35, looked exhausted, her blonde hair disheveled, her silk dress unable to mask her weariness. "Thank you," she said, sitting down. "I didn't think I deserved this after everything." "We help those who need it," Amara said gently. "Tell us what's going on." Laura confessed that her marriage to Henry had been hollow for years. Like his father, Charles Henry was controlling and obsessed with status. After Catherine was born, he said our family was complete. Laura recounted, her voice breaking. "I became the perfect wife while he lived a separate life. I found out he's been cheating with a colleague, but he refuses to talk." "Do you still love him?" Amara asked. Laura paused. "I love who he used to be. The man now, I'm not sure." James and Amara began supporting Laura through weekly talks, teaching her to set boundaries and confront Henry. In one session, Amara shared about their miscarriage and about learning to love through loss. "Sometimes, Laura, you have to choose yourself first," she said. "Not to destroy, but to rebuild." Laura nodded, eyes red. "How did you do it, Amara?" "When the world was against you." Amara smiled sadly. "My mother sang gospel to get through hard times. She taught me love is a flame that never dies if you keep it burning." Meanwhile, their adopted daughter Elena struggled with nightmares from her abusive past. One night, she woke crying, clutching her journal. Amara sat beside her on the bed, stroking her hair. "Want to share?" she asked. Elena hesitated, then handed Amara a journal page. "I wrote this," she said, "about wanting to be a writer to tell stories of kids like me, but I'm scared no one will listen." Amara read, tears falling silently. Elena's words were powerful, recounting a girl finding light in the darkness. "You'll do it," Amara said, hugging her. "I'll help you step by step." Elena looked up, calling Amara Mom for the first time. "Thank you, Mom." At that moment, Amara felt her heart heal a little. She thought of her mother singing Amazing Grace in Oakland's church and knew she was carrying on that legacy. Alongside helping Laura and Elena, Amara's program reached a milestone. One morning, she received a letter from Senator Patricia Williams inviting her and James to Washington, D.C. to present before the Education Committee on the impact of adult literacy. "Your program is a national model," the letter read. They flew to D.C. in November, standing before senators in an oak-paneled room. Amara spoke clearly in a navy dress, her curly hair tied high. "Every adult we teach to read doesn't just change their life, but their children's and communities. Rosa, my student, opened a bakery after learning to read. She's now her grandson's rock. Education is a door to freedom." In a gray suit, James added, "Investing in programs like Amara's isn't just ethical, it's effective. My fund proves doing good can be profitable, creating a positive cycle." The senators applauded, and Amara felt her mother smiling from above. They left D.C. with a federal funding commitment paving the way for Amara's program to expand to 20 cities. Back in the mission, they hosted a family dinner. Diego shared about his school's soccer tournament. Elena read a new story excerpt, and Noah gifted Amara a painting, A Family Under Moonlight. Laura arrived her first visit since the cafe and shared that she'd confronted Henry. "I told him to go to counseling," she said. "If he doesn't change, I'm leaving." "Thank you for giving me strength." James squeezed Amara's hand under the table, thinking of their journey from the charity gala through pain to this love-filled home. "We didn't just survive," he whispered to her after dinner as the kids went upstairs. "We're changing the world." Amara leaned into him, hearing imagined Monterey waves. Together she replied, knowing their chosen family and mission would endure. In the 24th year of their marriage, Amara Johnson, at 48, had accepted that she and James Carter would never have biological children. The pain of the miscarriage 20 years ago had become part of her. Still, it also drove her and James to build a different family, a chosen one with Diego, now 25, and a teacher, Elena, 26, an emerging writer, and Noah, 24, training to be a therapist. Their Victorian home in the Mission District remained a hub of love-hosting literacy classes, supporting struggling couples and nurturing dreams. Amara still ran the Bay Area Literacy Center, now with branches in 50 cities, thanks to federal funding. James continued his ethical investment fund recently, backing an affordable housing project for immigrant workers in Oakland. Their life was whole, but Amara noticed her body changing. Her cycles became irregular, then stopped. Dr. Sarah Chen, her friend and physician, confirmed she was entering perimenopause. "It's a new chapter," Amara told James one evening sitting on their porch watching neighborhood kids play ball. "I'm okay with it." James hugged her, kissing her hair. "We have a wonderful family, Amara. You're my everything." But on November 15th, everything shifted. When dizziness struck, Amara presented about adult education funding at a school board meeting. She gripped the conference table, sweat beading on her forehead. "Are you okay?" Principal Martinez asked, rushing to steady her. Amara nodded, but nausea forced her to excuse herself. She took a taxi to the ER, her heart pounding with worry. At the hospital, a young doctor named Wong took her history. "Any chance you're pregnant?" he asked. Amara gave a sad smile. "I'm 48 and haven't had a period in months." "No way." "We'll test anyway," Dr. Wong said professionally. James arrived as Amara awaited results, his face pale still in a suit from an investor meeting. He held her hand silent but present. "Doctor," Wong returned, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Carter, he said you're pregnant." "About 8 weeks." Amara froze as if the air had been sucked from the room. James let out a whoop, hugging her so tightly she could barely breathe. "It can't be," she whispered, tears spilling. "How rare but not impossible," Dr. Wong explained. Sometimes a final ovulation occurs before menopause. We'll monitor closely, as this is a high-risk pregnancy. They left the hospital sitting in the car, still reeling. A baby. James repeated, his hand on Amara's stomach. Our baby. Amara nodded, joy laced with worry. At 48, pregnancy was a perilous journey. But she thought of her mother singing Amazing Grace through hard times and felt a deep strength. That evening, they dusted off old pregnancy books from the closet. They laughed, reading about morning sickness like first-time parents. James called Dr. Chen, who agreed to oversee the pregnancy. Amara's in good health, she said over the phone, but we must be cautious. They visited Dr. Chen's clinic 2 weeks later for their first ultrasound. Amara lay on the table, clutching James's hand, eyes fixed on the screen. Dr. Chen moved the wand, then paused, smiling. Not one but two, she said. Twins. 2 boys, both developing well. James laughed, half joyful, half panicked. Twins. His voice cracked. Amara stared at the screen, seeing 2 tiny flickers with steady heartbeats. Tears fell. After 24 years of waiting, she carried not 1 miracle, but 2. You chose us, she whispered. After all this time, you chose us. They named the babies Isaiah, God Saves, and Elijah, God is My Strength, inspired by Amara's mother's hymns. They shared the news with Diego, Elena, and Noah via video call. Diego, teaching in Oakland, gaped. Mom, for real. At your age. Elena, from her San Jose apartment, sobbed. 2 brothers. I'll write books for them. Noah, at therapy school, laughed. You'll be amazing parents. Again, they held a small gospel service at Amara's mother's old Oakland church to give thanks for the miracle. The local choir sang, "Oh Happy Day," in purple robes, their voices echoing through worn wooden pews. Amara stood between James and their children, hand on her belly, singing joyfully. Diego filmed, Elena snapped photos, and Noah sketched a family under stained glass light. Amara's pregnancy was closely monitored. Dr. Chen ordered reduced work, light exercise, and a nutrient-rich diet. James became a devoted caretaker, cooking chicken soup from his grandmother's recipe and reading The Little Prince to Amara's belly nightly. The boys need to know Diego's favorite story, he said, smiling. Diego, Elena, and Noah pitched in. Diego brought children's books from his school. Elena wrote a short story about adventuring twin brothers. And Noah painted a mural in the nursery, an ocean scene from Monterey, where James and Amara honeymooned. This room's for Isaiah and Elijah, Noah said, hands streaked with blue paint. So they know how special our family is. Amara, though fatigued by twins, felt alive. She taught a small class at the center, where Rosa, now a bakery owner, brought cookies to celebrate. You're a miracle. Miss Amara. Rosa hugged her. Now you have 2 little miracles. One evening on their porch, Amara looked at James, her belly now round. You know, I think we needed all the pain before to be ready for this, she said. We learned to love without expecting anything, and now, God gave us this. James placed a hand on her belly, feeling a gentle kick. God's timing, he replied, kissing her. Isaiah and Elijah are our new beginning. Amara thought of her mother singing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot through tough days. Despite the risks ahead, she knew that their family, Diego, Elena, Noah, and now Isaiah and Elijah, was proof that love could transcend any limit. The San Francisco hospital room was bathed in sunlight, streaming through a large window overlooking the bay. Amara Johnson, 48, lay in bed, her face weary but radiant, cradling baby Isaiah in her arms. Beside her, James Carter, 50, held baby Elijah, his eyes brimming with awe and love. The twin boys, born 3 weeks early, were a miracle they hadn't dared dream of after 24 years of marriage, a devastating miscarriage, and their journey of adopting Diego, Elena, and Noah. With light brown skin and soft, curly hair, Isaiah slept peacefully in Amara's embrace. Elijah, slightly smaller, yawned, his tiny hand clutching James's shirt. "Look at them," Amara whispered, her voice hoarse after 12 hours of labor. "We did it, James." James smiled, kissing her forehead. "We always do when we're together." The past 3 days had been a dream. Diego, now a 25-year-old teacher, flew in from Oakland, bringing a giant teddy bear for his brothers. Elena, 26. A writer penned a short poem about 2 little stars and read it aloud in the room. Noah, 24. A therapy student drew a pastel sketch, a family of 7 under moonlight. The Bay Area Literacy Center sent a massive card signed by hundreds of students congratulating Miss Amara and her twin miracles. Rosa, a former student, now a bakery owner, delivered star-shaped cookies, crying as she hugged Amara. "You're our light," Rosa said. But on the 4th day, a soft knock disrupted the joyful atmosphere. Amara, nursing Isaiah, looked up. James opened the door to find Evelyn Carter, his mother, unseen since their hospital confrontation 20 years ago. Evelyn, now 75, looked aged, her white hair and wrinkled face framed by a simple gray dress devoid of her former lavish jewelry. Behind her stood the Carter family, Charles James's father, heir, thinning and leaning on a cane; Henry James's brother, with a pensive gaze; Laura, Henry's wife, holding flowers; and Catherine, their 16-year-old daughter, shy. Amara's heart tightened. James stood protectively at the door, his voice firm. "Mother, what are you all doing here?" Evelyn stepped forward, hands trembling. "James, Amara," she said, her voice breaking. We want to meet the babies. Please give us a chance." James looked at Amara, his eyes wary. Amara, though exhausted, saw something in Evelyn's gaze, not the old arrogance, but genuine pain and regret. She nodded slightly. "Let them in, James." The Carter family entered the room, heavy with tension. Evelyn stood by the bed, gazing at Isaiah in Amara's arms. "They're beautiful," she whispered, tears streaming. "Amara, James, I was wrong about everything." James crossed his arms, his voice cold. "Why now, after 25 years?" "What's this about?" Evelyn sat in a chair, hands covering her face. "Because I've lived in hell, James. I chose pride over my son. I hurt Amara, who's better than I ever was. 2 years ago, I joined a support group after losing a friend. I heard stories of forgiveness, of healing, and I realized I lost my family to selfishness." Laura stepped forward, placing the flowers on the table. "Amara, you saved my marriage," she said sincerely. "When Henry cheated you, and James taught me to stand up, I owe you. I told my mother-in-law she was wrong about you." Henry, who had insulted Amara during their honeymoon, bowed his head. "I was wrong, Amara. I thought you weren't enough, but you helped Laura and me find each other again." "I'm sorry." Charles, his voice raspy, spoke last. "James, I thought I built everything for you, money, status. But you and Amara built what I never had, a real family. I'm proud, even if it's too late." Amara studied their faces, recalling their cruel words, opportunist, barren, unworthy. But she also remembered her mother singing Amazing Grace in Oakland's church, teaching her that love means forgiveness. "I forgive you," she said, her voice clear. "Not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry hate anymore." Evelyn sobbed, kneeling by the bed. "May I hold him?" she asked, her voice trembling. Amara looked at James, who nodded slowly. She gently placed Isaiah in Evelyn's arms. Evelyn held him. tears falling down her cheeks. "He's so beautiful," she whispered. "Amara, I'm sorry for the pain I caused." James, holding Elijah, stood beside Amara. "Mother, you all took our past," he said, his voice soft but firm. "But the future is ours. If you want to be part of it, you respect my wife and our family." Charles nodded. "I'll set up a fund for Amara's program, no strings, to make amends, even if only partly." Laura hugged Amara, and Catherine shyly offered a handmade card. "Mom told me about you," the teen said. "I wanted to meet my cousins." Amara smiled, thinking of Diego, Elena, and Noah, the children who taught her family to be chosen. "They'll love meeting you," she said. The Carter family left after an hour, leaving a lighter but complex atmosphere. James sat beside Amara, holding Elijah. "You sure?" he asked. "After everything you forgave them?" "Not for them," Amara replied, watching Isaiah sleep. "For us. For Isaiah, Elijah, Diego, Elena, Noah. I want our kids to grow up in love, not hate." James kissed her, feeling her strength, the woman who turned pain into miracles. He considered the Oakland gospel service where Amara sang, "Oh Happy Day," while pregnant. "You're my light," he said. Amara leaned into him, listening to Isaiah's breaths. She knew reconciliation wouldn't be easy. It would take time, therapy, and clear boundaries. But today, she'd opened a door, as her mother had with hymns. Their bigger, more complex family was proof that love could heal the deepest wounds. In the 25th year of their marriage, the Victorian house in San Francisco's Mission District, owned by James Carter and Amara Johnson, stood steadfast, a lighthouse amid the city's fog. The walls that had once been peeling were painted a soothing blue, and the wooden floors were polished after years of restoration. The living room, once a literacy classroom, was adorned with Noah's artwork and family photos, Diego graduating college, Elena winning a literary award, and one-year-old twins, Isaiah and Elijah, grinning in Amara's arms. The house wasn't just a home. It was the heart of a legacy of love, where wounds were healed and dreams nurtured. Amara, 49, still led the Bay Area Literacy Center, now a national network, with 100 branches, empowering tens of thousands of adults through literacy. James, 51, continued his ethical investment fund, recently completing a clean energy housing project for 500 families in Richmond. But their most significant achievement was their family, Diego, 26, a math teacher in Oakland, engaged to Maria, a nurse. Elena, 27, a novelist whose debut explored foster children's lives. Noah, 25, a therapist helping youth overcome trauma. And Isaiah and Elijah, their tiny miracles toddling on unsteady legs. Every Sunday, the mission house brimmed with laughter and the aroma of food. Amara cooked gumbo from her mother's Oakland recipe, and its rich flavors filled the air. James baked bread, cracking jokes for the kids. Diego brought Maria and her daughter Sophia to play with Isaiah and Elijah. Elena arrived with a college friend reading excerpts from her new novel. Noah, with his boyfriend, introduced a newly rescued dog, sparking cheers from the children. Most surprising was the Carter family's presence, now part of these gatherings after last year's reconciliation. Evelyn Carter, 76, sat at the dining table feeding Elijah oatmeal, her eyes gentle. After apologizing to Amara in the hospital, she'd entered family therapy, confronting her past mistakes. "I once thought status was everything," she told Amara once washing dishes together. "Now I just want to be a good grandmother." Charles, though frail, established a $1 million fund for Amara's center, calling it the True Carter Legacy. Laura and Henry, having saved their marriage with Amara's guidance, visited often, bringing pastries from Rosa's bakery. Catherine, 17, played with Isaiah, asked Elena about writing, and called Amara Aunt Amara respectfully. That Sunday afternoon, as everyone gathered, Amara stood at the kitchen door watching her extended family. Diego taught Sophia chess. Elena read poetry to Laura and Noah sketched Catherine's portrait. James, graying at the temples, held Isaiah recounting Monterey's stories. Evelyn softly sang, Amazing Grace, the hymn Amara taught her to lull Elijah to sleep. Amara's heart swelled, recalling her mother singing, O Happy Day in Oakland's church, where love was the most significant force. Look at this, James, she said, pulling him to the porch. What we built from the pieces. James hugged her, watching the kids play in the yard. Not just from pieces, he replied. From love's stubbornness and you. They had just published Unconditional Love, a book chronicling their journey of overcoming prejudice and loss and building a chosen family. Amara's excerpt about her mother love is a flame that burns forever, no matter how the world tries to extinguish it, made it a bestseller, inspiring thousands of couples. Their workshops on communication and forgiveness had months-long wait lists. Universities invited them to lecture, and therapists adopted their methods. One evening, after the kids were in bed, Amara and James sat on the sofa, and Isaiah and Elijah were asleep in their crib nearby. Amara opened their book, reading a passage. Love isn't blood. It's a choice every day to stand together to forgive, to build from what's broken. She looked at James, eyes shining. We did it, didn't we? And more, James replied, kissing her. He thought of the charity gala 25 years ago, where he met Amara, the black woman in a navy dress, whose gaze changed his life. They'd faced humiliation, loss, and prejudice, but transformed them into a legacy, a family of 7, a healed community, and a better world. Amara leaned into him, listening to their sons' breaths. She remembered her mother singing, Swing low, sweet chariot through hardship, and knew her legacy lived on. We built forever, she whispered. Outside, San Francisco's fog blanketed the mission, but love's light shone inside the Victorian, an unquenchable flame. James and Amara, with the family and community they'd built, were proof that passion always triumphs through every trial, across every generation.